Um, my father's first cousin's name was Mary Joyce, and in 1935 she did a solo dog sled trip from Juneau to Fairbanks, and she took a route that no non-Alaskan had ever taken, and she did it solo with 5 dogs, but she had some Tlingit Indian guides along the way. And she was an amazing woman. I met her when I was a kid. She made a very strong impression on me. No, she wasn't big. She was actually very small. But she made a big impression on me. And she was a interesting and unusual and funny person. So I really liked her. And I read her journal. My cousin published her journal several years ago from the trip, what she wrote while she was on the trip. And it was so interesting and so lovely that I just finished it and thought, I have to write music for her. So I paired up with Steve Hudson, who is the piano player in my group, and we got together and started really researching Mary. I went to Alaska and researched her extensively. There's quite a bit of information available on her. But I took my first cousin, who's now in her 70s, who knew her very well and had lived in Alaska with her. And she introduced me to all kinds of people that knew her. And I did a very fun, extensive search into Mary Joyce. And I went to her grave. This sounds crazy, but I went to her grave and I asked her to help me get it right, because I didn't want to do some pandering or some sappy thing. I wanted to really make some nice music about her, and came back, and Steve and I wrote this music over the course of a year or so, and then we premiered it in Juneau at the Juneau Jazz and Classics Festival in 2011 or 12, and it was a great experience, and it's very fun. The music, we wanted to be a little adventurous, and Mary loved music, and it was the quartet plus Napoleon Maddox, who is a wonderful jazz beatboxer, and he's fantastic. And he joined us on the record and in Alaska, and it was a project full of joy. We did things like we thought a lot about Mary, and we just realized her story is kind of wild. Her whole story is a long and interesting story. She had moved to Alaska with a man who, had some issues, and so he died a couple years later. She stayed in the lodge. They lived in a very remote lodge outside of Juneau, the Taku Lodge. And she stayed there for a year by herself. And we just sort of imagined what life would be like living completely isolated for a year while you're grieving. And I wrote a ballad based on that. It was called Lonely Wilderness. And it just, it must have been pretty intense. For her. Now, she was the kind of person who was very uplifting. All the people that knew her were elevating while they were talking about her. I mean, she was really a positive force. So, one of the tunes is called Determined, because we just thought, God, the kind of determination that you have to go through a journey like that alone is pretty intense. So we did a lot of talking about her. And then coming up, one of us would come up with something and say, all right, work with this. And, the other one would take something and work on it, whether it was changes or a melody or something. So. Just like that. Okay.